Hello,
Right.
Stephanie. How are you?
Hi, Don.
Long time no see. You were just on our celebrity podcast where we talk about celebrity stories.
Yeah.
And I got you back, so I'm pretty lucky. So we would be remiss if we didn't talk about the most spectacular thing that might have happened in this century less than a week ago. You're looking puzzled. You?
Do you mean the Dodgers winning the World Series?
Of course I do. Now, I know that you're a true blue, okay, and we've got a handful of, not more than a handful, we've got a lot of people in the office that are
yeah.
true blues. Now, you got some people who go to games with us because our firm goes to these games, but you're one of the ones that are a true fan, you know. How long have you been a Dodgers fan?
Since my parents moved here, so my whole life.
Oh, my God.
Yeah.
So how did you get into it? Was your dad a Dodger fan?
I mean, I think my mom's more of a sports fan. So they would take me to games when I was a little kid, and then just, every year going to games became a regular thing, especially during the summer. That was the thing to do.
And that is pretty cool. So this year, it's just unbelievable. It was during COVID, and a lot of people are saying that there will be an asterisk, behind the World Series. But I think the asterisk should be the team that brought the spirit back to L.A.
Yeah.
Them and the Lakers. It's just amazing that we've got two champions. But
Yeah.
but I personally felt so good after that win.
It was such a great feeling. For me, it's probably going to be once in a lifetime.
No. Me, once in a lifetime. You, come on.
But Lakers and Dodgers,
Okay. Okay, I'll concede that. But, LA is becoming a sports town.
Yeah, definitely a championship town. I think also what was a great feeling knowing that, Kobe Bryant, rest in peace. I was just like, Kobe was watching over us.
That's really special. Yeah. I come from Chicago. Baseball is loved in Chicago and it's hated in Chicago because Chicago teams don't win that much. There's been a couple of fairly recent World Series teams, champions, but, we could go 100 years without winning one, right? So I come out to L.A. here. And it's the first time in my life that I've rooted for the team that I love and we win. And that it's been a process. It's been like a 4 or 5 year process for them to win this championship. Some might argue we should have really won it against
Last
Houston.
year.
Yeah. And so, but to see them, and I think that really during COVID, where our eyeballs needed something to watch that was live and
Yes, exactly.
and seeing the competition. It was just a great year.
Right, like a shared experience. That's what I was telling my mom. Now that Dodgers are over, Lakers are over, now what are we going to do?
Yeah, no kidding. So, well, one thing that we could do is we could celebrate Halloween.
All right.
So before we begin our talk, because we're going to talk about an appellate court decision today regarding domestic violence, a very important topic for the firm and everybody that's involved in family law. We're going to be talking about a new appellate court decision I think is worthy of talking about, but I want to keep it light for a little bit. One of the things is that our firm is hell-bent on winning every single year the championship of the costume contest. And I walked out in the hallway probably, 15 minutes ago, and I was amazed at what I saw. Did you see it?
Yeah.
Okay, let's look at what we saw when we were out in the hallway. Now, that is just amazing. The spirit. I as the managing partner of a law firm, I love it when people come together and they have fun like that. It really shows cohesiveness, and
Exactly.
I think it speaks of the competitive spirit of our office.
That too. Number one.
Yeah. Now, that was really awesome. And when I saw that, I was shocked. But our producer of our podcast, our man who does everything social media and marketing, went one step further. Okay, now he shocked me because I'm talking about David. David's sitting over to my right. He's not on camera. But, over the past, I'd say month, he's grown his hair out, man. He looked like a bushy dog, And the other day he walks into my office, and David, you could howl if I'm wrong about this, but he comes into my office and he's dyed his hair. And I'm going, dude, man, what's going on? And he explained it was for a Halloween costume or something like that. I'm like, let David be David, because David is a creative genius, and let him do that. So today, I walk in, ready to do this podcast, and he's got all his hair cut off. He's got a crew cut looking like he's in the military or something, I'm like, what, is he joining the military and not telling us or something? Right? So David, bushy, ragdog looking hair down to what is going on? Well, let's see what he did for Halloween.
All right.
Let's take a look at this.
Let's see.
Now that is hilarious. I mean,
That's great.
I mean, the man is always full of surprises, and we love him for that. Okay, well, that's the fun stuff for right now. Let's talk a little bit about this new appellate court decision. What's the name of it?
So this is Jennifer K. versus Sean K.
Okay. And in family court, a lot of times, or these appellate court decisions, they're referring to people's first names and they're kind of abbreviating things for privacy,
Right.
which I really don't understand in a lot of ways, but who am I? So anyways, Jennifer K. will call this case, right? So this involves a domestic violence allegation against a husband. And why don't you set up the facts for us?
Yeah, so Jennifer K. and Sean K. were actually in a romantic relationship. They were never married, but they did share a daughter. So it looks like 10 years after their relationship ended, she requested a restraining order against him based on three separate allegations. The first was a pretty serious allegation of rape, alleging that their child was the product of a rape. Then she alleged that he slammed her into a door. And then the third was that he punched a refrigerator near her head, intending to hit her head.
Okay, so let me stop you there. When I read the decision, and you correct me if I'm wrong, she was alleging that she was the victim of domestic violence. She was referring to incidents that occurred way back in time.
Yeah,
right? Like years ago, 7, 8, 10 years ago.
At least, right.
Okay, and she wasn't really alleging anything new as far as like within the next couple of years or anything. She's going back.
Going back, yes.
Okay. Now the appellate court decision is how many pages?
It's about 500 million. It's about 40. About 40.
I've never seen a appellate court decision regarding domestic violence so detailed.
Right.
And tell us why it was so detailed.
It was so detailed because each party had about 20 witnesses take the stand. So it was a 6-day hearing, I believe. And the judge, when he made his decision, he was very thorough in explaining why he made his decision.
Yeah, and the appellate court decision is a little unusual, I think, or maybe not. But, in the old days, they didn't write decisions this lengthy. And it seems like they went through every single witness's testimony and laid it all out. And maybe they did that for a purpose. Mm-hmm. And I think maybe we'll touch on that a little bit. But we're not going to go through every single incident. I mean, we'd be here for a couple of hours and everything. But in summary, what happened during the trial?
So during the trial, the judge allowed about 13 witnesses on each side. And essentially, each witness corroborated Dad's story of the events. Essentially, they corroborated that mother was the one that was very volatile and controlling and angry. So it became a credibility issue.
Well, let me stop you there. She did call some witnesses that vouched for her in some ways.
Yeah. I mean, they were her friends, and they would essentially say, "Oh, I don't know. She's never mentioned that he was controlling or abusive, but they would say, she's a great mom," type of thing.
Yeah, and he was a little bit of maybe an angry guy or something like that. Nobody was a precipient witness, right? So, okay, go ahead.
Right. No one actually had witnessed the alleged abuse. The damning maybe evidence was that he had a witness who did witness the alleged pushing her into the door incident. And she did testify. It was actually his wife at the time, but she testified that she witnessed that he did not slam the door on her. Instead, she pushed her body in between the door and the wall to try to get into the home.
Well, it's kind of interesting. He's remarried, and his current spouse comes in and testifies on his behalf.
You're right.
And was a precipient witness to an incident that she was claiming, the ex-wife was claiming, was a domestic violence incident. She's claiming what? The person who's making the allegation, Jennifer, what is she claiming?
Jennifer is claiming that he literally slammed her body into the door frame, which, sounds like a very violent act. So the judge did opine that if a reasonable person, if they would have experienced a violent act like that, more than likely would have probably told someone right after that happened. And in this case, Jennifer K. actually picked up Sean K.'s sister from the airport right after that happened and mentioned nothing about the incident. So the judge basically said he believed the boyfriend's story over Jennifer's story.
So the court is making some credibility calls.
Definitely
and as it pertains to this incident, the court's saying, well, I don't really believe that happened.
Right.
Now let's talk about, so there was 3 incidents. That's one of the 3. Mm-hmm. The other one was the serious allegation that he forced himself on her sexually while they were, I guess, in this apartment. They were kind of in a breakup relationship, but he had come over there and they had sex and she didn't want it or whatever and stuff. So that was another allegation.
Right.
And what was lacking in her testimony, or her evidence, I should say?
So the judge did mention that he thought it was odd that she didn't make the police report or that she hadn't really told anyone this happened. And that became a whole claim about gender bias and about not believing alleged rape victims. The trial court, the appellate court actually reasoned that in those type of situations where an alleged victim is still befriending the alleged, rapist after, in this case, they went to drink beers together after. They still had a sexual relationship. She allowed him to move into her apartment.
For many years
For
afterwards.
many years. So the judge thought that her behavior was inconsistent with the victim of rape.
And could I add that, and you correct me if I'm wrong here, is that there was nobody that testified that she ever brought it up. It was something that was a late, after years, right?
Right. So actually, she made these claims. She filed this application for a restraining order about 10 years after the alleged incidents. So that huge time gap was kind of a credibility issue as well.
Yeah, and on appeal, from what I remember, the appellate court said, look, we're going to take this seriously and take a look at the issue. And nobody's saying that victims of domestic violence, especially, sexual assaults like this, are expected to report it right away. In fact, they know that from studies that
Right.
a lot of them hold back.
Right.
But the appellate court said, if I'm right, is that over a long passage of time, then the court could look at that and say, and use it towards credibility, among
Yeah,
other things, right?
Exactly. And they also stated that they understood that there was a syndrome where victims still befriended their alleged abusers. And in that type of situation, the court would want to see statements from witnesses that the victim, said something to someone, this happened to me. Or that they could also put an expert on the stand regarding, I believe it's rape victim syndrome, to kind of combat that, not reporting issue.
Something over that long of a period of time,
Right.
mentioning it to a friend or anything like
Someone, yeah.
that. Okay, so the refrigerator incident. Talk about that.
Okay, so Jennifer Kay claims that they were in an argument in the kitchen and that Shane was angry and he wanted to punch her, but instead he punched the fridge, which happened to be right next to her head. And she was very fearful that he was going to hit her. But then Shane Kay testifies. He says, yes, I hit the fridge. I punched the fridge. It was one of the worst moments of my life. And before I punched the fridge, I stepped away from her and I punched the fridge and then I exited the home. So the court opined that they did not think he did not intentionally or recklessly intend on punching her. It was more of a rage of fit type of situation.
So I think that this is something that we need to maybe slow down and focus on this incident, because to me this was probably the biggest
Yep.
part of this case. So husband, or not the husband because they were never married. His name's Sean. Is that
Shane.
Shane. So Shane, he didn't have to, but he says, yeah, I did do this.
Yeah.
And I regret doing it. It was maybe one of the lowest points in my life.
Right.
I became frustrated and I punched the refrigerator. I think that him coming forward and being truthful about that was significant in the trial, don't you think?
Yeah. I mean, this was the only incident that Jennifer was contesting at the appellate court. And then she brought in testimony that he used to be a boxer and that he actually killed someone in the ring, using that as evidence to support that maybe he intended on hurting or killing her.
But it was refuted. I mean, he
Right.
took the stand. He said, no, I never killed anybody.
Yeah, and actually the owner of the boxing ring or something testified that he used to just work out there.
He used to get beat up a lot in the gym.
Exactly. No one wanted to take him on because he didn't have that much skill.
Yeah. So anyways, with regard to the refrigerator incident, I don't want to lose focus because even though he said, I didn't intend to hurt her or scare her, intent is not necessary in
Right.
these cases, right? I mean,
Right.
it's not an element like in a criminal case. We have to show a lot of times for particular crimes that there was specific intent.
Right.
In this case, that's not relevant. The legal standard was what?
So it's reckless or intentional to cause bodily injury, or it's that a reasonable person would be in apprehension, that they were going to be hurt like that.
Imminent harm, yeah. And I think that this confirms something that I'm pretty sure that I argued recently in court, even though the judge didn't agree with me. It's not a subjective standard.
Right.
It's a reasonable
Right.
standard. So a reasonable person, would a person reasonably be in fear of imminent bodily harm,
Right.
under these circumstances? And what did the Court of Appeals say about that?
So the Court of Appeals opined that it was not an intentional punch trying to hurt her. It was not reckless. A reasonable person would not be in fear of being punched because he did step away from her and towards the fridge.
Yeah. You know what I think this is important is I'm learning, because we're doing so many
Yeah.
domestic violence cases. I think that every family law attorney probably is right now. The law's been changed. It's been loosened up so that people could go in for abuse. And we know that the consequences are severe with
Yeah.
regard to findings of domestic violence. You get a findings against domestic violence, what happens in family court?
So there's a strong presumption against joint custody in family court.
Yeah, it could also impact spousal support. So every family law attorney worth their salt is looking at that as either, oops, we're in trouble,
Yeah.
or, hey, we need to allege this because it's happened and it's going to give your client an advantage. So, what's interesting is that we know from Marriage of Menjivar and some other appellate court decisions that the passage of time is not necessarily for something that the court has to consider, right? You can't say, well, that just happened, 6 months ago, or in enough time's passed, I don't think it's going to happen again. But this was a case of 10 years.
Yeah.
And you still have that one incident. It's a violent incident. Some people would argue that when you throw things across the room, like a cake, which happened in one of my cases, or you throw a lamp, across and it hits the wall, that's disturbing the peace.
Yeah.
I mean, people get upset about those
Definitely.
things, and stuff. Punching a refrigerator kind of falls within that same category, I
Yeah.
would think. But the Court of Appeal didn't opine, but it deferred to the trial court, right?
Right.
And so that tells us a lot about the trial court's discretion, doesn't it?
Yeah, definitely.
What does it tell us?
That the appellate courts will defer to trial courts and basically their conclusion as to witness credibility.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's really not an appealable thing. So if a judge says, I find that he's more credible than her, the appellate court's not going to, try to retry the case for them, right?
They're not going to go back and, yeah, exactly.
I'm finding that the judges are really hip to this now. And so when we go into court, they're very careful
Yeah.
in stating what their findings are and saying all the right things,
Exactly.
whether I agree with them or not in some of the cases. So it's very interesting. So what lessons do we learn from this case?
What lessons do we learn? Credible witnesses. The passage of time is a huge thing, right? You can't wait 10 years to report some sort of domestic abuse allegation. In this case, the corroborating witnesses corroborated his story, his story of the events, and that's why the judge opined that he was more credible than she was. So I think, get your witnesses, get your evidence, and when I first read this case, when I first read the headline, alleged rape, punching the refrigerator,
You're like,
throwing
uh-oh.
her into the door. I was
He's
like,
going down.
but the restraining order was denied. I was like, what? I need to read more. And that's what happened. His attorney presented a very good case for him.
Yeah. There's been a strong movement over the past 10 years of bringing domestic violence into the forefront in family court. When I started family law, there was maybe one or two appellate court decisions, believe it or not. I mean, the Domestic Violence Protected Act has been enacted, but nothing was going on with it. And so courts were at a loss and the decisions were going crazy, in a lot of different directions. Then all of a sudden, there was this understanding that family court is a place where domestic violence has to be taken very seriously.
Yeah.
And so we've seen these decisions come out, one after another. Every year when I talk about, the past decisions of the year, we're talking about at least 4 or 5 new cases, right?
Yeah.
It's probably the hot ticket item. And up there in Sacramento, they're enacting new legislation and they're doing all kinds of things like expanding the statute of limitations and, trying to make it easier for people to get relief and stuff. So I mention this because there's very few cases where the accused wins on appeal.
Yeah.
I mean, I can only think of maybe, two or three of them. I mean, there's one that's SM versus EP, I think it is, and that one was long ago. And a lot of people think that in that case, the appellate court might have gotten it wrong. So now we've got something that we could look at and cite to the court where in defense of people that might be falsely accused,
Yeah,
right?
exactly. And again, the trial court, huge discretion in deciding, what goes on. The appellate court's not going to really double question or review the evidence all over again. So you need to maintain that record, an explanation on the record from the judge as to why he ruled a certain way, and preserve your objections. I mean, that was a huge thing here, too. They didn't object to the whole rape victim allegations thing, so the court couldn't really review that.
Yeah, and know your judge, because judges, like every other human being on this planet, lean certain ways.
Right.
I don't want to say bias,
Nope.
because that's, that's this appellate court, we didn't get into this, but they spoke about bias.
Yeah.
But people have leanings and stuff, and if you've been in front of a judge a few times, you kind of know where they're at.
Exactly.
And we could let our clients know, hey, this is a challenge, or hey, it's looking good here because we've been here before.
Yeah, definitely know your judge.
Yeah. Okay. Well, Stephanie, you were awesome.
Thanks, Don.
What are you doing for Halloween?
Not much. I mean, can't really, maybe just leave candy on the porch for people to walk by and grab some.
You could dress up like a Dodger fan.
Yeah, I mean, that's every day, right? I'm waiting on my World Series gear.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. You know what? Next year the prices are going to be outrageous.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, some of those players are going to be leaving the team. So that's
Let's
what I'm
keep
seeing.
them all.
Okay. Well, thank you again for joining us.
All right, thanks, Don.
And thank you for joining Exhibit A.